Day of May 1950 at 6 p.m. At the Quai d'Orsay in Paris, the French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman gave a 3-minute speech in which he laid the foundation for the European house in which today 500 million Europeans live together in peace. Speaking of a world peace to end centuries-old rivalries and of Europe's shared destiny and responsibilities to the world, it may have seemed rather mundane simply to propose the European coal and steel community. Yet this economic project was a political expression of Christian ideals of forgiveness and reconciliation, the precursor to permanent peace. This was the defining moment of post-war Europe, for it launched the European movement for peace and unity that has led to today's European European Union. Well, welcome to this month's Schuman Talk, when we address issues facing Europeans today in the light of Robert Schuman's vision for a Europe that was a community of peoples deeply rooted in Christian values and promoting the common good for all. And today we have 3 guests joining us from Europe and from Germany. Actually, I'm right now in New Zealand, the other side of the world. I'll be returning to Europe this coming weekend. And our 3 guests come from Western Germany, from Eastern Germany, and from the Bundestag. And I've asked them to tell us about their Mutti, their Chancellor, Angela Merkel. Let's go to the next slide. Evi Rodemann comes to us from Western Europe, from Hamburg. Suse from Eastern Europe, Western Germany and Eastern Germany, Bad Blankenburg. And Frank Heinrich is a Salvation Army officer and theologian, but he's also a member of the Bundestag for Chemnitz, and he is involved in the Parliamentary Group Committee on Human Rights and Humanitarian Aid. And so we want to welcome the 3 of you to the studio. And we have been struggling a little bit with some of the technical side of things, the connection to Frank. So we hope this is going to go all right. But the reason why we are focusing in on the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, is that this year, which has just started, is going to be her very last year as that Chancellor. And in a time where we have seen many autocratic and populist leaders dominating the world scene, it has been, I would say, a moment of grace that we have been able to have a leader such as Angela Merkel in Germany, not only for Germany, but for Europe as well. It has been a moment of grace, a moment of mercy for Europe. And we're going to, I've asked each of our guests to share something of what they know through personal experience or through mutual contacts of the character of Angela Merkel. And can I have the next slide? On the next slide, we'll see how Angela Merkel has been the Chancellor from 2005 to 2000 up until now. She has outlasted 7 Italian prime ministers, 5 British prime ministers, 4 presidents, and 4 American presidents. And I think in her time, we could say 2 Russian presidents. I think we all know the construction there. This is truly remarkable. And we want to ask ourselves today, what is her secret? And we're going to also ask now, what does she have in common with Robert Schuman? We'll draw that conclusion right at the end. There is a common thread that we'll try to bring to the fore. So, welcome Frank, welcome Suse, welcome Evi. Frank, let's see if we're able to connect with you to see how we're going to be able to do this further. Can you hear us, Frank? All right. We may have to have phone. We may need to
the
use
technical
the phone
issues I
connection
don't
here.
get. But let's try it.
All right. We're coming in and out. In and out. All right. I write a week. Suse?
Should we try the phone?
Cannot hear me?
Yeah, I think we should try the phone.
Okay, just a second.
We just heard you then. But I think it might be safest if we use the phone. Yeah. Okay, but firstly, I write a weekly blog called Weekly Word, and
yes, we can.
Okay, this is good. Yes,
we can.
Okay, very good, very good. We're going to probably have a time delay that we'll deal with, but firstly, by way of introducing our conversation, last week in the Weekly Word, I wrote about Angela Merkel, and here we want to unpack it and flesh the story out with people who actually have contact with her. I showed a picture, which we're going to show here, of the Chancellery there, the Federal Chancellery in Berlin. I'll try to say it in German, the Bundeskanzleramt. It's the largest government headquarters in the world, which I was very surprised to read that. And there is a huge spacious apartment there for the Chancellor. And this was opened just at the end of the year 2000. Chancellor Schröder, of course, moved into this wonderful premise made. But 5 years later, when Angela Merkel was elected, she did not feel it appropriate to move into this building. She stayed in the very same apartment that she was already living in, with neighbors. And I think we are not used to that kind of, let's say, humility and self-effacing in our world leaders. So this is what we'd like to unpack a bit further this morning. Or I say this morning because it's very early in the morning for me in New Zealand, but this evening in Europe. And this has been reflected in figures that I included in the weekly blog from the Pew Research Organization just last October. Perhaps we can see those figures here. This screen is going to be rather small, but across the nations survey, there are 14 nations. 75% expressed confidence that Angela Merkel would do the right thing in the world affairs. Now, 63% was the figure for Macron, 50% for Johnson, Putin, 23%, Xi Jinping, 19%, and Donald Trump, 17%. Now, my question to our guests here today is, what is the confidence that you understand that she has in Germany? Because there's been lots of bumps in the road, ups and downs. You've had the refugee crisis, financial crisis, and internal crises, and so forth. So, Evi, what is your understanding of the current level of trust that there is in Angela Merkel?
Well, I can't give you the direct numbers. The latest one I saw is like that 4 of 5 out of 5 Germans really trust Angela Merkel. And I think no matter if you're part of her party or not, she has a high recognition in our country that she's trusted and that she's reliable, that she says, that she does what she says. So in general, I think people put a very high trust into her.
And Suse, that's
in that,
Yeah. Thank you. And Suse, would you corroborate that, or is it different from the Eastern German side?
She is quite an amazing lady that probably astonishes everyone. Whether you are a fan of her or not, you have to acknowledge that she has done something that we don't know of any other politician, I would say. How I would see her or describe her as a very hardworking, tenacious, and probably also underestimated a lot of times. Lady that she knows what she wants. She can look very far, and yet she is humble. At least this is how I perceive her. So I think Frank could probably tell much more from working closer around her. But she is a remarkable politician in our history, and that's for sure. And I personally, I'm very sad that even though Evi's just said that people trust her, I realized that very often we German people, we make fun of our leaders. And sometimes she gets reduced to that people talk about her hairstyle or, and different other things, and don't, or they just say, oh, Merkel, it's Merkel's fault for everything. And so they don't really recognize and appreciate what she's done for our country. That's how I see it.
All right. Well, let me ask Frank. I'm not sure if we're able to make contact with Frank, who walks the corridors of the Bundestag with Merkel and her closest workers. Frank, are you able to join us at all?
Frank?
If you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can speak.
So what exactly would you want to know? How I agree with both of my ladies that have been speaking before. I'm lived half time of my life, more than half, in the west of Germany, and now my work and my 25 years now are in East Germany. And I consider it as a blessing to have her as my boss, as my colleague on the one side, and as my boss on the other. And that has to do with heard. She is reliable. She is long thinking and not just short thinking and not just looking for applause. And she, if she's in the room, she's really there. And a different way and in a different spirit. And the numbers, by the way, there is not a leader that I know of that has been in leadership of that level for more than 5 years that has still the acceptance or even favor of more than 50% of its country as a person, which is still happening after 15 years.
Yeah.
That is remarkable. That is remarkable. You called her reliable. What other adjectives would you use for Angela Merkel, Frank?
Now, she has leadership abilities. I would call her humble, as we said, as somebody said, Suse, I guess. I would say she is, in the Bible, we would call it long-suffering. So she has endurance, or she has patience, the long breath. I don't know if that's an English expression. We have it as a German.
Yeah, and endurance. Yeah.
Yes, she is focused in the long run, not just to get the applause of the moment and the numbers that sometimes the polls are asking.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Thank you. What can I ask Evi what other adjectives come to your mind that haven't been mentioned so far?
Yeah, it actually was a very good exercise when you invited us on the call to actually think more strategically about what we think, are her strengths. And actually, I made a whole list of things which, came to my mind. So some of the things which are not mentioned maybe yet. I really feel that she desires the best for our country. It's never about her, building her own kingdom. It is always out there looking for the best, for the nation. What is needed? What is appropriate for the nation? I also think, high resilience. I think in this working environment, sometimes it's very tough. And I've never heard her speak badly about any other person in public. It might be done somewhere internally, but she's not the one, splashing out scolding others or speaking badly of others or even behind their backs. I just think that's such a high value, and especially when I ask the young ones, some of them who've met there, they said it's just amazing that she's just truthful in what she says, and she backs it up with her own life. You know she stands on her values.
Respectful and truthful. That's what I hear you saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And Suse, are there any other adjectives to come to your mind?
Yes. The one time when I met her, I have to say I perceived that she has an incredible authority. That just how can I describe? She just takes over the room, but in a very humble and very focused way, I would say. It's not like, like a stage person that she wants to be the center of attention. Mm-hmm. But in the one particular situation, I was just amazed at her authority in the room. You can really, if you're sensitive for that, that's what I perceive, that she has an incredible power that is simply there because of the person she is.
So she commands respect. She brings a personal presence to the situation. Yes. Frank, I don't know if there's any other adjectives that you come to mind, but I wonder if you could tell us some stories from your own, some anecdotes that would back up these adjectives.
Now there are some. I remember coming back from a trip abroad, having talked to a high spiritual person in the Muslim world, and he gave me some messages for her. And I remember asking for an 8-minute talk to her, so she knows I don't need much time. And but she gave me 2 or 3 messages, and then I had another message from my city, and so the appointment was there in a few days, and we talked it through. And when I came home, talked to my son the Friday after about these 8 minutes, the thing that I told him first were, I cannot believe the impact it had, because all these 8 minutes, she did not seem to be under pressure of the next appointment. She was totally there. Secondly, she didn't make the impression that she needs to go away and that she's important, And thirdly, in between a few days, I had answers of her chancellor's office, of her government office. So that was diligent, that was open-eared and heart, and trying to solve. And I felt it was very humble, although she's sometimes very, seems to be very silent and calm. I remember sitting with her and watching. I didn't recognize her coming into the room while some of our colleagues had watched the Champions League game, And she just slipped into the room in the back. We didn't recognize. And then there was an almost goal. And then she was almost on top of the sofa. She was yelling, and she was totally there. She was with her heart on the spot without making noise about it. I know that she made noise about the situation and in the football game. But she was totally in the moment without making fuss of it. That was quite impressive to me.
Thank you. And Evi, what have you heard among your colleagues, people who've had the privilege of meeting with her?
Yeah, I just asked some of my young ones who have been invited to the Castle Bellevue. Sometimes they have these meetings where they honor voluntary workers who are, passionate about this stuff. And so one of my young ones was in the area near to her, and so not sure if I could approach her or not. That was her saying. And then Angela Merkel would just, come up and say hi to everyone, greet everyone. She was saying that was the most impressive to her, because it wasn't like she was a different person up at on the camera than she was behind the camera. So she was just very friendly, I mean, she's more of a distant type. She's not very emotional as much as we see her. At least, I have never met her in person, but she is approachable in that regard. And when I was just even looking through some of the stuff, even one of my friends, collects selfies, and so having a selfie with her, that was just so easygoing. She wasn't making a big fuss or saying, I'm too important for you, but she looked them into the eyes, and acknowledged them. And that was very, very powerful.
And Suse, I know in a little bit we're going to talk about the phase where Angela Merkel opened up the borders of Germany, allowed 1 million refugees to come in from Syria. We'll come back to that, Suse, but because you've got a video for us to see on that. But I just wonder, what do you know concerning just her daily lifestyle at home, and her shopping and dressing, and these aspects of her personality? What adjectives would come to your mind there, or stories that you can tell about that?
Well, to be honest, I don't really know too much about it. I just know that she's a very solid person, down to earth. She likes cooking. She likes going skiing in the mountains. She likes arts or music. Whenever she has time, which is not a lot, I mean, I'm just amazed at the amount of hours and works over the years she has done. If you think about all the different crises that she managed, and 16 hours of meeting where she had to be fully concentrated, and this on a 7-day basis, I think, without a break. So she doesn't have a lot of time, but when she does, that's what I read about her. She didn't tell me. But it's just what I read, is that she likes to go out in nature, and she likes to go to concerts, and just being a very normal person.
Well, when I wrote the Weekly Word last week, I did a little bit of research, what journalists have asked her, and they say, why are you always wearing the same kind of clothes? Actually, if you notice, she has the blazer is her favorite, and with different colors and different collars at times, but basically that has been her favorite. There we go. Over the years. And she had some professional advice and so forth, and but then she'd been asked by the reporters, why don't you vary your clothing a lot more? She said, I am a government employee. I'm not a model.
And I love it.
Yeah.
I read it again in your weekly news, I thought, this is exactly what I remember about her, not making a fuss about herself. I mean, once in a while we saw her in a dirndl dress, that was like, whoa, a big surprise to us.
Yes. Yeah, and she was given advice as to what would be the appropriate style for her, what would flatter her, and but she's just very conscious and accepts who she is. I think something else that really struck me was that they said, "Well, tell us about your staff at home. Who helps you?" And said, "Well, it's just my husband and I, and I sort the washing and he puts it in the washing machine." They no nonsense. I mean, surely she's really she's been called the most powerful woman in the world and the Queen of Europe and things like that, and yet she hasn't. She doesn't. I mean, she could easily justify to herself, "Look, I've got these 16-hour days and so on. I really need someone to help," and yet she's just plodding on as if she was just a normal German citizen. And that speaks volumes, doesn't it? Yeah. Frank, do you want to add any personal details about her daily lifestyle?
Now, what comes to my mind is that even in doing business, I mean, we have every session week, we have our caucus meeting where we talk all these subjects of the week as the whole caucus of our party, parliamentarians of our party in Parliament. And never in my 11 years somebody from the front or her had to say, please come to this meeting. There is nothing more important than this meeting because we have to decide and everything. And the main reason why never she had or they had to tell us, because in the 11 years I have missed her just 3 times. I just remember of 11 years that Tuesday afternoons she has been there. So she's leading by example. You know, being diligent, being good thoughts, down to earth, and she's just there. So whoever could say of himself that he has something more important than come to our caucus meeting, if she hasn't a bigger reason to come to this all the time. And the three times that I remember, she had reasons. One time it was a flood in Germany. Second time there was a G10 meeting or G20 meeting in China. She couldn't fly back as fast as this would have happened. And the third time she had a broken leg because of skiing, as it was shared. So that was the only reason for her not to attend. And that's her style. Yeah. Priorities and following them herself before asking anybody else to do that.
Yes, and I also recall reading about her doing her own shopping even and lining up at the queue to pay at the checkout. Truly amazing, and we don't have to think very far to think of very different examples from different leaders around the world who enjoy the flashy power, the cars, etc., and the attention. But there have been times where she hasn't been so popular with the German people, or with, let's say, the Greeks, the financial crisis, 2007, 2008. Can we talk about that? The financial, let's do the financial aspect first, and then we'll look at the refugee crisis. Frank, do you want to comment on her handling of the financial crisis?
Now, that was half and half my being part of the parliament. I remember that when she had to campaign in 2009, that was in the time of the financial crisis and the coming out of it, her main line was, we will fight that Germany, we, in Europe, but also Europe, will be stronger after this crisis than we've been before. So that is not a goal of just solve and manage problems of the now, but having a vision of how we can get as a corporate identity of Germany and Europe to become even stronger than before. And it happened that way. And she tried with the government people things that are now tried to be copied by other countries that are needed now in the crisis of COVID-19 again. There are laws like we assist companies if they send their people into short-time work. So if they can just work half-time because of regulations, the country pays not the full amount to 100%, but 60 to 80%. And this now helps in other crises as well. So and I remember one moment that really opened my eyes. She's really relying as a scientist, as she was, on data. I remember driving inside of the house to our caucus meeting, and our former finance minister was with us in the accelerator, in the lift, up into the house. And she asked him a question where I even had struggled to understand the question, which was quite complicated and a measure and something. And then he gave her a very sophisticated answer, which I even didn't much understand. But a few minutes later, in her talking to us as caucus, and the 300 whatever of us, she took that information exactly in her own words into application of what needs to be done in that financial situation. And that is quite something. So her brain must be not just bright, but very good wired. And I don't know how a brain can operate like that. I just don't.
Yes. Now, she was accused by many as wanting to make Germany strong against other nations at Greece's expense, for example, and very often she was depicted as a kind of a Hitler figure with a little moustache and so forth. Did you have the impression that she has been? I mean, you mentioned now let's make Germany stronger. Was that at the expense of the other European countries, or what was your impression?
Now, we had, and that was the good point for us, or the good starting point. We had done some regulation and changes in the years before, and they were really good, and we had a consolidated setting. That means that others that did not do these harmful changes before the financial crisis had much longer and stronger struggle. That they have the impression outside that we now telling them how they should have or should do now looks like, as you mentioned. But from the inside of Germany, she was the mother of the nation. She's not elected for Europe, she is elected for Germany, and I wouldn't count that against the other. I see much more that she has lots more often said, if Europe is doing well, Germany is doing well. So she's always trying to do both foot on the ground to the favor and the goodness of both. Because if Europe is going down the drain, Germany is. But if Germany is prospering, Europe is prospering. And so that's always interdependent.
Okay, thank you, Frank. That's a very central thought. And I think since the establishment of Germany after the war, there's been this strong consciousness, of course, starting with Western Germany, and then as Eastern Germany joined, the realization that Germany needs Europe and Europe needs Germany. And therefore, whoever leads Germany has a very crucial role in the whole welfare of Europe. And this is why we can see her 16 years as a real phase of grace and mercy for Europe. It could have been very, very different if we had populist, bureaucratic style leader. And unfortunately, we see in the fringes of German politics that kind of movement that has grabbed the opportunity, such as the refugee situation and so on, to become more popular. Now, so Susie, tell us, when it came to this opening up of the gate of the country, and I think we have a slide there that came up a little while ago, this quote from Angela Merkel, and the picture of that little boy that was on the beach. Yeah, that's it. That was the little boy the little child that was drowned, that really grabbed the world's attention and spoke to the world's conscience. And Angela Merkel's comment then was, when it comes to human dignity, we cannot make compromises. But that led to widespread criticism and fear. Can we talk about this? What was each of you, with your observations of how she handled that crisis and what you felt about it? And then we'll ask, where are these refugees and migrants today? Let's start with Evi, and then I'll ask Frank, and then Suse can introduce us to the video that she's got to show.
Yes. Well, I think at the start, I think Germany was very open-minded and very open-hearted. I think from the confidence Angela Merkel conveyed, and to us as a nation, I think most of us were very open and willing to receive them. I think we had no oversight what it might mean to receive 1 million. And I think 1 million maybe wasn't planned at the start. It was just saying we need to open our hearts, and what would happen to us if we would be in a migrant crisis or whatever. So trying to reverse that. So out of her, she opened the gates for that. And so I think we were very open-minded. I think there just came a turning point when sometimes we people felt flooded by these foreigners and couldn't handle them. I think at the start, I was super proud to be a German. I was super proud to be of my country, of all these sharing mentalities, we went so many extra miles for the refugees at the start, and still do in some regards today. But I was super proud that we would actually be able to host these refugees and welcome them. I think some of it was hard. How would this look like in the infrastructure, the organizing of this all? So some of that was not handled very well, I would say. But I strongly believe that. She followed her conscience, and I think most of us were at the start. We were absolutely in it and for it.
Thank you. And Frank, from your perspective, how was that handled?
Yes. First comes to my mind that many people in 15 and 16 that were not Evi's and my opinion on this, being proud of the reaction. They always asked her, you made something wrong, Mrs. Merkel, and you should now tell us that this was wrong, so please ask us for forgiveness, and now let's go on from there. The funny thing is that she did say what was wrong. And she said these two things openly, but the media didn't grab it or people didn't hear it. She said we weren't prepared. And she didn't say in that September and ongoing 2015, but she said we weren't prepared in our system. We locked down the refugee camp institutions. We didn't have enough social workers. We didn't have the teachers to have the courses for German and stuff. And she said, and I did something wrong. That line that she said in the beginning several times, we can do that, wir schaffen das in German. She said, I shouldn't have said that so often without saying what I mean. And she criticized her own communication. She found out that she should have communicated more about it. And that is still the big problem, because then the communication went out of our hands. I see that many people created fear, differently, by the way. In western parts of our country, in the states that were former Deutschland, Bundesrepublik, there they were used to much more people coming in the 60s and 70s to Germany to help in the working market and to build up Germany. So they had struggles too. But for example, the eastern part, the new states of Germany, as we call them, they didn't have that experience. And now that's not just a different language, but also a different culture. And some even said they are all Muslims, and they didn't cope with that at all. So there was a communication that broke, and that made the difficulties. And that even brought up a new party that swiped into parliament, and that got all these nerves and these fear onto the street. And yeah, they painted black where some others had painted just white, and that was our struggle then, because it's never white or black. And so the challenge for Germany, these 880,000, as we found out in the end, that came in these 1 year, they were in all over the country. We still have some problems. There is the asylum system of Europe, not just Germany, and the processes in Germany, how to react and to process in the law and in the institutions. But they are all there now. But the jiggling and with the numbers in this all discussions, that has been not good communicated. In the meantime, many of them have jobs. Many of them know the language. You know, two of our, not from that time, but before, people that assimilated into Germany were the two inventors of one of the medicines now that we give to, you know, one of the famous three. And this is a pride in general, and I think 80 to 90% of Germany agree with that. But still, there is that fear implanted through the miscommunication.
Yes. Thank you, Frank. If you've just joined us or didn't catch at the beginning, Frank Heinrich. We've had technical difficulties getting the names and the photos, the live photo. So I just want to say that Frank Heinrich, he's a member of the Bundestag, from the CDU, CHU, and not CHU, I'm sorry, CDU, and help me, Frank. Yeah, it is CHU. And we used to have an old Dutch party with that name. I thought I was getting my wires crossed. And so Frank is speaking from the inside of the Bundestag to see that the way he sees Angela Merkel at work is an inside picture, but it corresponds totally with the picture that people have from the outside. What you see is what you get. Suse, I know that people have said to Angela Merkel, but aren't you afraid we're going to be have our country overrun with Muslims? And what have you heard Angela Merkel say to that?
I think it was one of the most the moments that struck me the most, how sharp she is and what an inner conviction she has, because it was on this press conference that she was asked whether she's afraid to actually turn Europe into a Muslim continent, and or especially Germany, that it will be her fault in the future when Germany turns around, that it will always go back to that time when she allowed all the Muslims to come in. And so without thinking for a second, she would respond, she would say, you know, if we are 82 million people and we have 4 million Muslims, we don't need to talk about who is majority and who is minority. I am not afraid, because fear is actually a motivation that is not a good one to make any decisions. So I am not afraid, but I am very concerned and I'm very worried that our own people, we don't know our roots, we don't know where we come from. And she said, why, you know, if you go outside the street, she said, and ask the people, what does Pentecost mean, the vacation, the holidays that we have, you will be amazed at what kind of answers you get. Or when was it the last time you went to a church service or you took a Bible and you read it? Just ask yourself these questions, and this is what I'm concerned about. As long as we know who we are and where we come from, we don't need to be afraid of the future. But if we don't know our identity, then we can be concerned. So I was really impressed with that answer, where she didn't even have to think twice.
That's amazing. Now, I know, Suse, you've been involved with some of these refugee children. And tell us about the time when you were able to introduce some of them to Angela Merkel.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. It actually started that we, as a base from Youth with a Mission in Bad Blankenburg, we had a fasting and prayer time about actually another issue. And during this time, it was a 10-day period where we would always fast lunch and meet for prayer during this time. And during this 9 days, we actually had 3 times impressions from different people, from different nations. One time it was like, what is the president of Germany? What was her name again? I saw a picture of her, somebody said. And then another time there was a girl from Korea. She said, it's a really strange picture, but I saw Angela Merkel skiing in the mountains and there was an avalanche coming, covering her, and we thought she's going to die and be killed, but then she came out and everything was fine. And I was like, oh, that's really strange. So we wrote all the things down. And on the 8th day of this fasting time, I received an email from the CDU because I'm part of the CDU. And basically, it was an invitation to the regional conference in our region where Angela Merkel would speak. And, you get a lot of information, a lot of invitations and when you're politically involved. And I wasn't really making any connections. I just clicked it away because I wasn't really keen on going there. The next morning in my quiet time, I heard the Lord saying to me, Suse, what else do I need to do? You guys are fasting, you are praying, you receive 3 times Angela Merkel in different ways. You get an invitation to the conference and you just click it away. And so I was like, oh my gosh, what does that mean again? And I'm like, okay, Lord, whatever. So anyways, to make a long story short, we had our base evening. We always have an open evening every week where everyone can come. And our refugee kids, they were playing for the first time. They were performing their first song because they're playing violin. And they just started to learn, okay? So it's 8 weeks into them learning how to play the violin. So anybody who knows anything about violins knows this is not sounding like the greatest after 8 weeks. And yet they performed the song, A Mighty Fortress is Our God. And as they were playing, I was really moved seeing those kids from Afghanistan and from Syria playing together with a German. And in this moment, I just had this thought. I thought, oh, what about if they would play for Angela Merkel? Wouldn't that be great? Because that was 2016. It was in the middle of the crisis where people were just criticizing her all the time. And I just thought, man, as a moment of encouragement, that she sees this is going somewhere. This is, it's not so hopeless as the people say at the moment. And then in the next moment, I thought, oh, what a stupid thought. Oh, no, this means a lot of trouble. And anyways, but I felt the Lord was like, why did I give you this idea? So we ended up registering all the kids for this regional conference. And it basically was the day after this evening we had. So when I asked the kids, I said, would you be ready to play for Angela Merkel? I cannot promise you that it will work because nothing is arranged, but maybe we get in, who knows? And then the kids were like, that is very strange because our teacher always said, practice well because you never know, one day you will play for Angela Merkel. So what happened is we all got in the car, we went to Jena, to this regional conference. It was actually 4 very heavy checkups we had to get through with our violin cases. Nothing was arranged. And somehow the Lord got us through. And and then as we got into the hall, I saw someone that I knew from the Evangelical Alliance in Brandenburg. So I went up to him and I said, Mr. Seller, you don't know me, but I know you from the Evangelical Alliance. He said, can you help me? We are here with some refugee kids and they want to play for Angela Merkel. Could you make a way? And he's like, oh yeah, I will try. So he disappeared. And sure enough, after 2 minutes, he comes back. And I say to the kids, now get ready any moment. And they said, no, we're not ready. We need to go to the bathroom. So I said, no. So anyways, he comes back and he says, the chancellor wants her to come right to her room behind backstage and the kids. And so I was like, whoa, okay, it actually worked. So we got in, and there was big bodyguards, and then Miss Roselle said, it's the Chancellor's personal wish that these kids come to her. That was really moving. And then those big bodyguards said, well, if it's the Chancellor's wish, I guess we have to move aside. So they let them all in. And then she was sitting there just eating her dinner, just biting into a sandwich, just like a mutti, because one of the kids said she's like a mutti for us. And so it was really, and then she saw the kids and she said, well, this is so wonderful that you come to see me. Thank you for coming. And the kids were like frozen. They're like, oh, that's her? Oh, and then someone said to me, she's so small. So anyway,
all right, let's then go straight to the video.
Yeah, it's beginner's violin. Okay,
it's not the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, of course, but let's hear what Angela Merkel heard. Okay, thank you very much for that story, Suse.
Yes, just one thing. I mean, I was really asking myself, why did we need to do this? Because it was such a clear guidance. I was not keen on doing this, but I felt really the Lord led very clearly to do this. And as we got through, as I walked outside after we were done, I said, Lord, what was this about? I don't get it. I really don't understand, because I'm not like a chaser or VIP people. Mm-hmm. And then I said, Lord, give me I just want one sign that she mentions the kids on the conference and the song we played for her, because we didn't tell her what song we're going to play. But I just said, Lord, I just want to know that this had a meaning, and maybe in the spiritual realm, maybe it was a very personal encouragement for her in a very difficult time. And then as the conference went on and we were watching it, in the middle of it, the people started, of course, asking about the refugee crisis. It was 2016, 1 year after they all let them in. Mm-hmm. So, and there was a lot of difficult questions. And she says, well, this last year has been a very difficult year. And no one of us wants to repeat that year again. But she says, already there's everywhere signs of hope. Just before this conference started, some kids from Afghanistan were in my room, and they played A Mighty Fortress Is Our God for me. It moved me really deeply. And the moment she said, A Mighty Fortress Is Our God, in this moment, everybody in the room started to clap. And I was thinking, well, I'm in Eastern Germany. People are usually not so keen about God. But I felt like the Spirit of God maybe just took over the people. But it was a very special moment in this conference. And even the very critical voices somehow got pushed back. But so I don't know exactly why. Maybe it was a personal encouragement to her, why we had to do this. It was an assignment from God, I know it. But it was a very special story that none of us will forget.
Okay, well, Suse, you brought up the aspect of Angela Merkel talking about faith. Frank, what is the role of Angela Merkel's faith, and how is that expressed in her politics? She doesn't seem to be somebody who effuses talking about her faith in the open, but what is the role of her faith?
Now, if you ask her, if you approach her, you get answers that are pretty clear. As Suse shared a moment ago, when she put it down, or we have to fear this Muslim overtaking Europe or Germany, her answer was no, the problem is much more the vacuum that the churches have and the emptiness of our faith. That is much more of a danger. Now that tells a lot. And she's not just sharing that in an interview, she's sometimes putting that down into our meetings. Not very often, but if you talk to her privately or in other closed meetings, she does. But she's not wearing it as a tag on her forehead, tattooed, I'm a Christian. She says, I'm responsible for all Germans, as we put it down on our, as the words, dem ganzen Volke, dem deutschen Volke, on our parliament building. But so she respects that our different faith, but she's always close to the line, that one of the founding lines of our Constitution, which says we act in responsibility before God and men. And she acts that way. And she does that in the style. She's not always or often rebuking people, but if she has another way of thinking or another way of acting, she does that in a very solemn and humble way. And you see her faith not just coming through her mouth at certain moments. And she's a pastor's daughter. I would wonder why she knows that song. She could, when we have our Christmas events as party caucus, she's always the one on stage that sings every song, Christian song, without looking on the paper. Because that's part of her. And I can confirm, I don't know into her heart, but I see by her deeds, I see by her decisions, I see even in critical decisions that she is not going by the flow, but that she tries to take responsibility on these founding values.
Thank you, Frank. Now, our time is slipping by, and so is time for Angela Merkel. By the end of the year, somebody else will be stepping into her shoes. And that's the big question, of course. Who can fill her shoes? And here she is being sworn in as a much younger looking Angela Merkel in 2005. Is that a question that causes a lot of anxiety in Germany today? I think one thing to remember is that when she actually was taking this oath, she was considered by many in her own party as a temporary transitional leader until somebody of Helmut Kohl's stature, whether that be literal or figurative, would come along and take over. Instead, she is leaving a huge shadow. As someone who, or I think shadow is the wrong word, really, but she has had a gigantic stature. Just what we've been talking about before. We don't have to go very far from Germany to think of leaders who have kept refugees out in the name of safeguarding a Christian heritage. We've seen that happen on the other side of the Atlantic as well. Instead, she has exhibited a truly Christian attitude of loving one's neighbor. But what about this question, who will fill her shoes? Perhaps, Frank, if you can comment on that.
Now, nobody knows who can fill these shoes. And that is, I don't know if I would call it anxiety, but there are many question marks. But as you referred to 2005, nobody knew who would fill in Mr. Schröder's or Mr. Kohl's, which was from our party, shoes. Nobody would have known. And I think from the spiritual side, it has always to be the anointment anyway, the anointing for a new position. So I have hope that this will just happen to the one that will be running and maybe going to be the successor of her. But we don't know yet. There's nobody who was able to prove his ability to do. How could somebody? And there is, I said that there are still more than 50, 60%, depends on the week. If you question or ask people in Germany who agree with her as a person and politician, who favors her as a person, that must not mean that the party that she belongs to is as favored as well. So there is a lot of diverse discussions in Germany going on. But I see there are some that could be able, if they get the favor in the first place, if they get the anointing in the second, and he has to take his own steps. The same shoes will not fit.
Thank you, Frank. And Evi, do you have any thoughts yourself on this matter?
Well, I just think at the moment, I just think that it's quite a vulnerable situation we're in. We're hoping for the best, and we have seen, that it has worked for the best of the country. So I want to, rather be hopeful and trusting that something good is going to come, but it will be, it will be interesting. And I think as Christians, for us, I think we are called to pray into that situation, and whoever is going to be elected, we will give our best support to that person.
And I think we've seen enough today, to know this is not just a matter for Germany, but the Christians everywhere in Europe should be praying for her successor. We can thank God for her influence across Europe and her example, and also pray for her successor, because it's going to be a big act to follow, that's for sure. And in the course of our discussion this evening, we've used the various adjectives to describe her, and I want to just go through some of these adjectives. Maybe if we can have the slide of the comparison with Robert Schuman as well, when we talked about how do we compare these two. And although I'm from a Protestant evangelical Baptist background, the Catholics are actually in the process of beatifying Robert Schuman. Now, I must say that in all my readings about Robert Schuman, I have not found anything negative about this man, which is quite remarkable. I came across a quote from a Swiss newspaper at the time saying that Robert Schuman was a very different sort of politician. He was not like other French politicians. He was not a womanizer. He didn't come from Sorbonne. He didn't use his position to either enrich himself or enjoy his privileges and so on. And so there are many similarities that we see, and both of them with their faith really motivating and inspiring their political actions. But we've talked about being humility and reliability and the leadership, stepping into being prepared to go where others are afraid to go, the endurance, the focused, resilient, respectful, truthful, commanding respect from others, diligent, attentive, open, listening, calm, and authentic, being an example. I think all of these adjectives actually would apply to both of these people. And we can be extremely grateful for this season of grace, where we've seen somebody of her stature and her character in the leadership of Germany, and also de facto in the whole of Europe. And so I want to thank you very much, Frank and Suse and Evi, for joining us on this most interesting discussion. And thank you for sharing your own personal perspectives. We're going to be back again next month, again on April the 9th, with another guest or other guests on a subject yet to be determined. and we look forward to reconnecting. Thank you very much. God bless, and we'll keep praying for Angela Merkel and her successor.
Thank you.